we are happy to welcome Brian Batko here onto Foxborough Rush, covers the team for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Brian, how are you today? You got the backdrop of the Steelers facility and everything behind you.
I'm doing great. And yes, some sort of train apparatus coming behind me as well. So the Steelers need to get back to some grimy, gritty roots on the field. And this is where they do it at in Pittsburgh at the UPMC Rooney Sports Complex. Trains going by, all sorts of stuff happening. Thanks for having me on.
Brian told us as we were getting ready that sometimes, when the trains see the players out there, they give them a toot when they drive by. Look, Brian, I'm going to go right to that run game. You talk about grittiness. We certainly haven't seen it in the rushing game from the Steelers in the early going this season, right? Under 75 yards in both week 1 and week 2. What's the talk amongst players and coaches this week when it comes to getting that run game going?
Yeah, I think they certainly want to have a ground game as part of their DNA. I mean, that's basically the most cliche Steelers football narrative that you can throw out there in any given year. They're built on the run game. They're trying to, really establish that in any given week. But they've got DK Metcalf in here. They signed Aaron Rodgers. They've invested a lot in their tight ends, in Jonnu Smith, former Patriot, and Pat Freiermuth, a Boston area native. So it comes down to kind of the X's and O's that make sense in any given week versus the philosophy that they want to instill from the top down. And I don't know if it's more matchup related or if their young offensive line hasn't gelled just yet, but they've certainly looked better throwing the ball than they have trying to get it going on the ground.
And in throwing the ball, Rodgers mentioned and others mentioned earlier this week that they want to get the ball in the hands of Jaylen Warren more in the passing game. So how do you expect the Steelers to use him against the Patriots?
Yeah, I mean, I think they'll try to use those quick passes as an extension of the run game if they can't just, line up, push people off the ball and run it between the tackles. And again, they've got a lot invested in their offensive line, but they're pretty young. I mean, they've got 3 second-year guys in that group and a third-year player in Broderick Jones who's making the switch from right tackle to left tackle. So they are very much a work in progress. The best spark for them, the only really silver lining from their week 2 home opener loss to the Seahawks was what Jaylen Warren was doing with the ball in his hands, and that was a 65-yard catch and run where he was making things happen in the open field. And based on what I saw from the Patriots against the Dolphins last week, we know the Steelers coaches are watching that same film and sure as heck watching a lot more of it than me. They had some trouble bringing people down in space. So I think the Steelers will try to use Jaylen Warren that way.
Yeah, I'm sure the Steelers coaches have been watching it. I'm also pretty confident Aaron Rodgers has been watching it as well. And the Patriots had a lot of missed tackles. We've certainly seen, the Dolphins have explosive plays against them. We saw the same thing week 1. So what have you heard, just in terms of, you mentioned how they've built this team, right? We all know who Aaron Rodgers is as a quarterback. Do you expect them to have an emphasis on the run game, or do you expect them to just use what they have and go against what the Patriots have been giving up in the passing game?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty funny. Yesterday we were talking to second-year Steelers offensive coordinator Arthur Smith about that, and he was not shy about discussing how paranoid he was to give away any strategies. He says Mike Vrabel has his henchmen out there listening for what he might say, and I think he was saying that in a good-natured way because of how close those two are, and they go way back. But he gave a special shout-out to John Stryker's stretch, as he said. Any X's and O's inkling that he would put out there, the Patriots would be able to pick up on. So he did not really want to get into what their mindset is going to be going into this game. But, I mean, I think for most weeks for the Steelers, sure, they'll try to establish it. But if a team takes that away and makes them one-dimensional and puts more pressure on this kind of shuffled offensive line with guys who some of whom are only playing, their third game in their new positions really in the NFL, if they can make the Steelers one-dimensional and put more pressure on Aaron Rodgers, literally and figuratively, some of those deep plays, the DK Metcalf or Calvin Austin, maybe don't have time to develop, and you sort of make this offense play with one hand tied behind its back.
You mentioned just the connections between both teams, and you can definitely see why they're going to have tight lips headed into this weekend. But Aaron Rodgers, just as a Steeler, what are your initial thoughts on having him in Pittsburgh?
Yeah, it's still pretty surreal, Annabelle. I mean, it's a strange sight to see him in black and gold, black and yellow, depending on your generation of Steelers fan, I guess. But, week one, they barely faced any adversity as an offense. They got a short field. He cashed in, threw 4 touchdown passes. Everything was clicking as they put up 34 points to win at the Jets. But week two, some of it started to crash down around him. There are a lot of times there where it's sort of like, all right, is that a coverage sack? Did he run into that one? He's obviously not as spry as he used to be. And there was the first moment of, we've seen Aaron Rodgers and, the tempers flare and frustrations at times when a receiver isn't where he needs him to be or doesn't run the right route. Last week it was Calvin Austin, who's a beloved player here in Pittsburgh, really, who was just trying to make a play and ended up having a ball clang off of his hands and into a Seahawks player's hands for an interception. And Aaron Rodgers acknowledged that after the game, but was also very careful, I think, to say, we love Calvin. He's just trying to get something done for our offense in that situation, and I still trust him. I'm going to come back to him. So I think he's very cognizant of all of those narratives, and he's been interesting to watch thus far. And at 1-1, he said he doesn't want to get too binary and say that the Steelers need a win to pull out of the funk they were in last week, but clearly that's the business that they're in the NFL, and this could be his last ride through it.
I know it's an interesting one to watch, like just in the quarterbacks alone, right? I mean, you have Drake Maye, who obviously looked up to Aaron Rodgers as a kid, watching him play this game, and he'll be on the opposing sideline, with Aaron Rodgers, quite possibly in his last trip to play in New England in his career. I want to go to a guy who is a recent Steeler, but has a long history, of course, here in New England, and that would be Jabrill Peppers. He spoke this week about kind of the difference for him going against a former team, something he's done before, but not quite in the same way that he has done previously, Brian. And I just wonder, what have you heard from him this week, right? Like he said, this means maybe a little bit more to me this week than maybe it has in those previous instances.
Yeah, I liked it because we're coming off 2 consecutive weeks in which Aaron Rodgers had a big payback game against the Jets, said basically nothing about them. DK Metcalf had a big matchup with his former team, the Seahawks, said it's just like any other game. Jabrill Peppers went the complete opposite way, which I think is the more candid way. And so far from Jabrill, I'm seeing that he is a pretty honest interview and basically says what's on his mind, for better or worse. I know you all experienced that in New England while he was there. And yeah, I mean, he does seem to have a little bit of a chip on his shoulder in this one. I remember asking him what happened when he got cut by the Patriots and why he was available for the Steelers to sign going into week 2. And he said, sometimes you're just not good enough and they just decide that they don't want you around anymore. He didn't mention the scheme fit or anything like that with Mike Vrabel. So I'm sure he said that tongue in cheek. I'm sure he still has a lot of confidence in himself. And while he played 0 defensive snaps in his Steelers debut a week ago, I think you're going to see him in there this week. I don't know if it's just going to be in short yardage sub packages or obvious running downs, but I think they are ready, especially after the way the defense struggled against the Seahawks, to see what Peppers can give them in the back end.
You can imagine, too, that Tomlin wants to put a guy out there who's ready to go and fight, right, and is going to have those high emotions, too, in that game. But I do want to ask you about a moment in the Seahawks-Steelers game last week. It was a missed kickoff, ended up in a Seahawks touchdown with George Halani, and really a missed opportunity on special teams. How have you seen the Steelers clean that up and address that mistake in the fourth quarter?
Well, I guess the first way they're going to address that is they're not going to have rookie running back Caleb Johnson returning kicks anymore, which it's kind of like, all right, I understand that maybe the moment was too big for him, but he's probably the last guy on earth who's going to get that rule wrong again at this point. So I think it was also more so he wasn't really giving them much in the return game. I mean, he didn't do it the last couple years at Iowa as he sort of settled into their featured back. So I think that absolutely there's more of a microscope and a spotlight on Steelers special teams right now. Usually they are making the highlight shows for blocked punts, or the week before against the Jets, they had another running back strip an opposing kick returner. So that phase of the game tends to be a positive and a plus for the Steelers. It's weird to see a week where everybody is talking about their lack of attention to detail. But yeah, that was a brutal moment for a young player. And they, going back to what we were talking about at the beginning, they could use their 3rd round pick, Caleb Johnson, to maybe get some things going between the tackles if they are going to be able to run against this really good Patriots front. But I just don't know if they have that trust or that confidence in him right now.
How would you describe the overall atmosphere within the team this week? Like you said, I mean, obviously some missed opportunities, some mistakes, as we were just talking about against the Seahawks last week. Got the big win against the Jets in a really back and forth game in the opener. How would you assess just that overall feeling inside the locker room this week, Brian?
I think one good thing about the Steelers and the culture they have under Mike Tomlin is it is sort of tough to tell on a weekly basis whether they're coming off a big win or a terrible loss or a close loss or a close win. They're generally pretty even-keeled that way, and it probably helps when you have long-tenured players like Cam Hayward, T.J. Watt, and now Aaron Rodgers brings a certain presence and gravitas to that room as well. So, I mean, I think everybody understands that what they've put out there defensively the first couple weeks is actually embarrassing, you know, relative to all the hype that was surrounding this team going into the season. But they're also saying it's a long season, and it's just they're 1-1. You know, they've got a long way to go, and you know, they've got a big trip looming after this one to Dublin, which means a lot to the Rooney family here in Pittsburgh against the Vikings. So can't get caught looking ahead, and if anything, maybe losing that home opener last week sort of brought them down a peg a little bit, and you know they have no choice but to be laser focused on a Patriots team that, yeah, a lot of familiarity. We mentioned Peppers, but Jawan Bentley signed to the practice squad this week. I don't think you'll see him out there just yet. He's got to get ramped up. But Daniel Ekuale, who might play a little bit more on the interior because they need help stopping the run, and Robert Spillane over there with the Patriots, who kind of got his first big break here in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Brian, curious just to know from your perspective, if you were setting the game plan for this Steelers team, what are your keys to the game for the Steelers to come out with a win?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to try to keep Drake Maye in the pocket, just what he can do with his legs, extending plays. And now you're asking your defensive backs that are missing two starters and Deshaun Elliott at safety, Joey Porter Jr. at corner to cover even longer against Kayshon Boutte and Stephon Diggs and Kyle Williams if he's out there. That's a very difficult assignment. So, I mean, they've got to be ready for Drake Maye to get into those scramble drills and ad-lib. But if they can, try to keep him in the pocket and allow Jalen Ramsey to go up and just win contested catch opportunities, because I think I would take him and Darius Slay in those matchups if it's just a jump ball more often than not. And, you know, as far as the other side of the ball, you have to be able to protect Aaron Rodgers, because, again, if you let Milton Williams, Harold Landry just pin their ears back and go, it could be a long day for a 41-year-old who, he can maneuver a little bit. I thought he looked more nimble in week 2 than he did week 1, but he's still not going to tuck and run like Drake Maye does and move the chains with his legs. So you're going to be able to, you're going to have to give him a clean pocket and some time for him to be able to pick apart a secondary that I think is still reeling up there in New England.
Yeah, he's talked a little bit about that mobility and getting the legs going a little bit more. We'll see what that means. And, of course, the Patriots leading the league in sacks right now. Brian, before we let you go, give us a prediction for Sunday afternoon.
Oh, it's a tough one. I think this game is basically a coin flip. It's hard for me to see the Steelers falling to 1-2 because of how much talent they do have. And, you know, maybe it comes down to the healthier team. It looks like the Patriots are trending in the right direction there and the Steelers are not. But I'll say they find a way to get one more play from Aaron Rodgers, kind of like they did in week 1. Maybe that's DK Metcalf taking advantage of a matchup on the outside, and that's the difference. But I truly see it could go either way. I'll say Steelers 20, Patriots 19. Maybe even the kicker matchup comes into play in this one, because Chris Boswell is as good as any in the league, and I know the Patriots rookie was having some struggles last week.
Yeah, can hit the long one, but getting those PATs in proved to be a little challenging last week. Brian, we appreciate the time here today. Safe trip up to New England, and we will see how it all shakes out.
Yep, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Brian Batko with the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette with us here, and much more ahead here. We'll dive more into this matchup between the Patriots and the Steelers. We'll hear from some of the New England players, including the quarterback, and what it was like watching Aaron Rodgers as he had his own quarterback dreams when, you know, wasn't all that long ago. Stick around, much more ahead right here on Foxborough Rush.